So please join me in welcoming Athina Rachel Tsangari. So, before we talk about the new movie, let's go back a ways. Before you made any movies, you were living in Austin at a certain stage when you weren't really thinking about being a filmmaker. Is that right?
Yeah, actually, I was not living in Austin. I went to Austin sent by the Fulbright Foundation to improve my English and acclimate myself because I had gotten a grant to study at NYU something completely unrelated. It was performance studies. And then on the first day, I arrived, and I was suddenly in Austin, Texas, in the middle of the afternoon in the summer. I literally bumped into Richard Linklater auditioning. And it was too hot outside, so I just sat on that sofa. And he thought I had gone there to audition, and I started talking to him as if I was going to be one of his subjects. And he realized that I had not come to audition. I was just resting from the shock of being in Austin, Texas. And then, next day I left my American history and American culture classes, and I escaped from my dorm, and I moved in with them, and I became, part of the crew of Slacker.
So what was so surprising to you, and how did that affect you in the sense that it made you want to be more of a film person instead of exclusively performance studies?
I didn't know. Completely young, thinking that basically I want to do theater for the rest of my life because I had come from theater, studying theater, ancient Greek drama primarily. But there was something about the way Rick and all of his crew, who were basically his best friends working, using people and the city around him as sort of like found footage in a way. Like everything was coming from them, all the ideas, all the, he was just basically creating this ethnographic portrait of America in the beginning of the 90s. And there was something so organic about the way he was doing it, so effortless, that I thought, okay, that's great. So you just hang out with your friends, and you're going through this very interesting process of being a retriever of stories. And actually that was something that spoke a lot to me because, I don't know, I like when the process is very organic and it's based a lot on camaraderie. So I spent about a month and a half with them. I went to New York. I finished my master's in performance studies. But at that point, I bought myself a camera, and I started shooting obsessively and documenting everything obsessively around me. And then I knew that I was abducted. And
when you were documenting things, were you actually trying to turn it into a film, or were they
no,
just sort of...
No, it was phase one, which was, and actually that was something that Rick had taught me, that in the beginning, just try to see the same things, because I am an obsessive voyeur and people watcher and obsessive question asker, if that's a word. So he said, you have what it, you just keep asking questions, so you keep just staring at people, so you'll be fine. Just get the camera and see how these translate looking through the lens. And no, it was sort of like my tool, my new tool. I actually didn't do anything with that footage. ever. But when I finished at NYU, he said, come to Austin. There's a great film school, and there's a community here. And also, it's going to be much easier for you to make films. You don't have to struggle so much if you stay in New York.
So was it easier?
Yes. It was amazing, actually. It was also, I moved to Austin in 1993. And that's when it was really becoming quite a hub of cinema industry, and at the same time, acute cinephilia, which was very much instigated by the Austin Film Society. But then, because I'm so competitive, I said, okay, so you have the Austin Film Society, I'm gonna make something else. I'm gonna make Cinema Texas, so I'm just gonna go much more avant-garde than you. So a part of us at school, we created a film festival called Cinema Texas, which ended up becoming quite a groundbreaking short film, sonic arts performance festival, where basically lots of the strange films that couldn't get into any of the festival, they would come to Cinema Texas. So we actually, and we were students, it was all volunteer, and it was our way of having a parallel film school, by watching all of these shorts that people were making from all over the world and educating ourselves.
So what sort of films were you watching?
For example, I think we showed the first short film by Apichatpong Versatokul, the first short film by Miranda July, the first short film by Kelly Reichardt, the first short film by Gomez. So it was great cinema, and lots of these filmmakers actually, including us, who were students then, but then became filmmakers. It was a very essential way of learning cinema.
So you say, you're competitive, but when did that sort of translate into actually making movies? I mean, Linklater at that point was churning them out year after year, right?
Yeah. I made The Slow Business of Going, which was my thesis film in a way. It started as, I made the short, my very first short called Fit, F-I-T, about a woman who can't fit things inside other things. That's literally the story. And that was nominated for a Student Academy Award. And from that, I got some money. And with that very little money, I made a feature, which was a series of shorts that we would shoot in hotel rooms in different cities around the world. And each episode was an adaptation of my reworking of a certain genre. So again, that was another kind of school. When you come from Greece, and you're a girl, it's very difficult to think that you're ever gonna be a filmmaker. It doesn't even cross your mind. And you second guess and you double guess and you test yourself, or at least I did forever, until I thought that I was ready to make something. It took some time, so I felt like I really needed to earn a screening of my movie. So it was quite a fun, but at the same time very sometimes painful process, to get into the point where I feel like, yes, up until today, I don't say that I'm a film director, I say that I'm a filmmaker. That means that, and I really believe in that cinema is something beyond an art. It's for us who are in it. It's addiction. Is a religion. and somehow we have to earn it with every single film.
Well, and then your second film, Attenberg, obviously got a whole bunch of attention on the festival circuit, and it speaks to a lot of the influences that you're talking about here. On the one hand, it's experimental in the way that it explores human relationships. On the other hand, there are familiar genre elements there. It's a coming-of-age story, or it's a drama about a friendship, and so on. How did sort of the, bringing all of that together in a way that people responded to positively sort of affect how you saw yourself as a filmmaker, that this film got so much traction all over the world?
It took a long time between The Slow Beach of Going and Attenberg. And, everyone was asking why it took me so long. But for me, everything that you do in between, so for example, I moved back to Greece after Austin, and we started our own production company, which was an extremely important, almost revolutionary breakthrough point for our generation, because we really took the fate into our hands. So, for example, in Greece, up until very recently, in order to make a film, you had to wait in line behind, 99% men of much older age who had to make their films. And then if there was a little bit of money left, then they would be given to us. Having come from America and seeing that actually you can make a movie for very little money, and you don't have to be relying on the state, and you don't actually really need the state to come say, you, my daughter, you're like good enough, so I'm gonna give you the huge amount of like 60,000 euros to make your oeuvre. Yorgos, for example, he was a very successful commercial director. I had just finished doing the opening ceremony of the Olympic Games in Athens, which was like a huge deal. And
you don't say.
Yeah, going from The Slow Beach of Going that costed $5, to managing a budget, that was millions, and be the director and producer of that was, hallucinating, to say the least. To basically be to be speaking with Barco, and actually working with Barco to create the first high-def projector so they would project my handmade videos in the opening ceremony was incredible. And then I realized that this way, it really doesn't matter what kind of budget you have. It matters if you have like a very precise vision for it and good sense of finances.
Well, you mentioned a couple of different things here.
But to finish my thought, at that point, Yorgos, who I met when I went back to Greece, was an extremely successful commercial director. I was considered very, very successful. I also had a film, The Slow Beach of Going, which had a very nice festival life. Unlike my peers in Greece, who, there was no one to really help them get the films out in the festivals. There was not like a gateway. That was really before everyone got distribution into their hands. So even at that place, it was impossible for us to get our film funded through the Greek Film Center because we did not belong in that, elite group of established with credentials, according to, Greek cinema. So we just did it ourselves. And that was Kineta, his first film. And, we managed to get it out completely by ourselves to festivals. And, that was the beginning of basically a new way of producing. And, everyone asks us about, how come our films have this particular way of delivery of the actors, this relationship between reality and fantasy. And I should say that this is actually something that has existed forever in Greek literature and Greek theater. The fact that we were in charge and completely control of our scripts, and we didn't have to go through any committees, actually liberated this kind of writing that actually rooted to very old, Greek tradition that you could see in experimental theater, for example, for years in Greece. You just couldn't see it on cinema. So it was liberated.
Right, but I can imagine this might be why you were sort of frustrated when people saw this as a new wave that came out of nowhere in a way.
Yeah, completely, because there is no parthenogenesis. Of course it didn't come from nowhere, it's just that for the first time, a different kind of Greek cinema was extroverted. We figured out a way out of the borders of a country that was, quite esoteric.
Yeah, right. To say the
Now
least.
it's not. Now it's, completely public and big news everywhere for different reasons.
So should we kill off the term Greek weird wave once and for all?
Yes, can you kill it right now?
Let's just make an
Can you just
agreement.
put an embargo? Can you just tomorrow at IndieWire say kill Greek weird wave, like in huge bold letters, and then just send it to everyone? In fact, don't have anything else on IndieWire tomorrow. Just have that.
Well,
I think it might, make a difference.
What should we call it instead?
Mm,
Greek cinema
yeah,
as a starter.
yeah.
Which brings us to the latest example, Chevalier. It's a fascinating movie, as people have said, an entirely male cast, all set on a boat, except for a few scenes on a beach. Tell us a little bit about kind of formulating this movie in particular, and what sort of themes you were trying to get at with the very particular scenario that we're dealing with here. A bunch of guys on a boat competing to be the best at something.
In everything.
In everything.
It's a companion piece to The Capsule, which is a film I did after Attenberg. Not very many people have seen that.
It's a short film that was sort of commissioned.
It was commissioned by an arts collector, and it was made with an all-female cast. And again, it was about power and control and how it feels to actually trying to basically gain your position in your immediate milieu and maintain it, and become the best and be rewarded by that. To me, this is very basic instinct of survival that we have, and also a daily ritual in our lives everywhere. It was so interesting to actually see all these amazing actresses which came from completely different backgrounds, different nationalities. We were in a old 18th century villa in the island of Hydra in Greece. And we were there for 4 days. They didn't know anything about the script, and everything about this experience was to see which one of them was going to be the best in replacing the headmistress of the institute, so the so-called institute. The headmistress was played by Ariane Labed. The great experiment that happened in that villa, and it was an experiment of human behavior. It was, it was something that I think we all remember with. It was very interesting. It was very intense, and we all learned a lot. And
but it's also very funny, which is we feel
Yeah.
like you're flexing another muscle in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's always fun. And the thing is that I think casting in everything I do is 90% of my directing. So, you know, all the girls who arrived on these boats like at dawn to participate in this film, which was also like an experiment on human behavior. I knew that, first of all, they were going to get along with each other, that it was never going to become nasty and weird, and also that, yeah, we're going to create something together. So the collaborative aspect is extremely important. And then after that, I said, okay, what would happen if a similar thing, if I tried a similar thing with a cast of men, very, very strong men, Greek men, with different hues of machismo and different hues of fragility. So it took me actually a long time to cast. And casting was not at all about reading lines, it was conversations. And sometimes I would have this conversation 3 or 4 times until I decided that it would be him. But that was the only thing between my casting director and myself. The only thing we were looking for are men who were very strong and very fragile at the same time, and they were not afraid of their female side. And in the end, it was, you know, it was very hard. I went to the set thinking, what did I get myself into? I might get lynched in the end of all of this. But no, it was great. I learned a lot, and it was a challenge. But in every film that I do, it's a challenge. I put a new challenge, and that was a challenge, you know, to how to wage this little expedition on a boat in the middle of the sea for 40 days.
Well, and what's interesting about it is that it's a very accessible movie, I think, to a lot of different kinds of sensibilities. Some people might see a comedy, other people might see a study of human behavior, and it operates on both of those levels. There's a third level that I think is very easy to get into once you think about it in a certain context, which is this some sort of a statement on the Greek crisis or what's been going on in that sense, because you have a bunch of powerful guys in a room bickering about stuff and not getting anything done. And it sounds a lot like what we've been reading in the headlines. So. What do you think?
Okay. Yes.
So we're not getting into that side of the thematics in that sense.
I don't like those very, very, you know, you critics always do that, you know, this like very, very, very tidy, you know, analogies and correlations between cause and effect, or between, especially when it comes to national cinema, sometimes it's way, you know, a bit too tidy in terms of classifying it and finding similarities with the political, social situation. I work very instinctively, and I am a filter of my country. You know, everything goes through me every day. I didn't wake up and say, okay, I'm gonna get you, you fuckers. You know, I hate you. You know, and you have completely ruined my trust in everything I believe in terms of my country, in terms of government, in terms of, you know, the left party, which, you know, I grew up a member of that, and really believing in revolution. It should have been a huge deal that the left party suddenly is in the government, but it doesn't make any difference. So yeah, there is. If you get me started, you know, I can tell you a lot. But I didn't wake up saying, okay, I'm gonna make an allegory, because it's not just about Greece, right? It is. We're living through times which is the end of ideology and the end of politics everywhere, and that's what's going on. So I can't say that this boat is a Greek boat.
Could be anywhere.
Yeah.
And now you're in New York, so you're spending some time here thinking about another movie, and you're actually going to move beyond the Greek borders for this one. You want to tell us a little bit about what that process has been like?
Yeah, it's actually really, really great. I believe in fate. You know, I'm Greek. So I started work. You know, when you're editing a movie, and especially Chevalier was an extremely difficult movie for me to do. It was the first time I had done dialogue, you know, where actually people talk a lot, more than like a few lines in each scene, and with an ensemble cast. And it was really like in the editing work, you know, trying to compose a symphony between instruments that were not necessarily playing the same piece. So sometimes I just wanted to just give up. And the great thing about that is that you get so you get so desperate that you start thinking about your next movie. So I started thinking about a movie that was completely the opposite of that. So it's an action film. It's a neo-noir caper with a group of international crooks. Cities are very important to me in everything I do, space in general, urban environments. So it is, in a way, an homage to cities. And again, like you can say a reworking
yeah.
of a action noir genre. And actually, one of the cities is New York. So when the Film Society told me that I was going to be the resident, I was just, you know, I thought, okay, it's fate, because it just, now this movie needs to happen. So it actually, I think that I really moved on, really writing this film because of the residents. And now, in between, you know, I have Chevalier, so I travel a lot to festivals. So I'm not throughout in New York here, but even when I come back and I have like 3 days here, I just walk, location scouting, and I have, you know, I already, you know, I have, if the movie is made, I have maybe like 50% of my locations already.
Wow. Well, I won't ask you if it's an allegory. Why don't we take some audience questions? I know we have a microphone here. We have time for maybe one or two. There's one here. Anybody? Yeah, in the back.
Hey, can you talk about your process in conceiving and then shooting the like sort of dance sequences in Attenberg, the walking sequences? Do you know what I'm talking about?
The dance sequences.
The scenes where the two women are walking hand in hand.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Did you? I mean, I'm curious. Like, did you
You
collaborate
want me to
with
spoil the magic? I'm not
do.
gonna
Yeah,
do that.
I do.
Well, movement is a big part of all your films. Maybe you could talk just a little bit about sort of choreographic movement as
That's
a storytelling
better.
device.
Okay. I'm joking. It's in every of my films, starting from my very first short films until Chevalier, and in White Knuckles, which is the next one, choreographing movement of the bodies and the faces, and even movement of the voices is extremely important to me. I almost consider, like in my head, when I set up every film, I think of it as a musical without music. You know, without music set to the movements or the voices. But I always compose it as a musical. So in Attenberg, I really, the easy answer is I could have shown these two girls who were the freaks of the town being freaks, or I could have found another way, working always a few steps away from realism, to be like the renegades, the freaks, the weird ones that did not belong in the society of that little town. So that's why I figured out that maybe they could do those silly walks. And we watched lots of Monty Python, which I adore. And I actually, every time I start making a movie, I watch Monty Python and Buster Keaton. And that's a really huge inspiration for the way my actors will eventually translate those movements into something else. You might not see it, but that's how we always start. So there's always some stuff that we watch. Yeah, and then also each one of them picked an animal that they were throughout the movie in their heads, from the David Attenborough documentaries, which we watched also in the rehearsals. Like as a, you know, I know you're an actor and a director, and I think that it's important when you go to rehearsals or when you start a movie to have a pantry full of stuff that's your stuff that you're gonna share, and it's going to create the tools by which actors and crew will work with. So it's this sharing of gifts is a very important part of the process.
Other questions?
Petra von Ger, hello. I would be interested, how do you get your ideas and the vision you've been talking about? Is this the idea, and is this the same in the beginning of the film and in the end?
I don't know how I get the ideas. Obviously, with great difficulty, because I don't make very many movies. It takes a long time for me, but that's okay, because I don't really want to see making movies as something that I have to crank out, that, somehow time or history or my peers or my friends are waiting for me, every 2 years to have a movie. So when I'm ready and when I think that I actually really have something to say and I know how to say it and I have found the tools for it, then I do it. Attenborough the slow business of going was basically the accumulation of everything I had been until I was 25. So it was just like this big vomit. Attenborough was another kind of autobiography, almost like a fantasized autobiography. I was neither of these two girls, but I knew lots of girls like that, and also part of it was my anticipation of my father's departure. So it was, in that case, I prepared myself for when this very important man in my life was going to leave me. So instead, I never went to do psychoanalysis, and instead of that, I make cinema. And Chevalier, the capsule was, again, like my fascination with this very vital question of power. What does it mean to have power? Why do we want power so much? With the different nuances of power. I think in all of my films, it's all about that, power and lack of power, and the transitions between the different identities that we adopt and accumulate for ourselves. And actually, the freedom of being able to change identities and to be nomads and to have breakthroughs and be brave enough to live a part of our lives and become someone else. So in a way, all of my films deal with this because I talk from personal experience. I chose very early in my life to be a nomad. They start with images, not with stories, and then somehow, don't ask me how, they become stories.
We have time for one more question. Just wait for the microphone so we can get it. Sorry.
Any particular filmmakers, women filmmakers, like Lena Wertmiller? Particularly, that name just came to mind because she deals a lot with power, specifically among men and women. Any particular filmmakers that you admire or have influenced you?
This is a tricky question, and I'll give you a tricky answer because I don't identify. I don't identify myself as a woman filmmaker, but as a filmmaker. So I have lots of role models and lots. We are the sum of our influences, and especially after. A century and a half of cinema, when you make cinema and when you basically watch every day half of our lives, half of my autobiography is what I have watched, because that's what I do half of my life, if not more. So, and every week it changes. I have like my pantheon of movies, not so much or filmmakers, who are sort of like, as I said, like my own little pantry. But talking about women filmmakers, Chantal Ackerman. She's important.
And it's obviously a powerful time to bring that up. Well, we've got your life story. We killed off the term Greek weird wave. We've accomplished a lot, and now it's time for Chevalier to screen. So thanks for being here, and thanks for sticking around.